Now what kind of a question is that? It was Letty who said it. Come on, Ruth Ann, you jumped on me for asking a dumb question. What about Billy's? It ain't a dumb question, Billy said. My granddaddy used to work at the depot, and he tells a story about how a fella got hit by a train in Kansas City, and dead as he was, he stayed on that engine car all the way to Manifest Depot. Nobody wanted to peel him off, and since he had a round-trip ticket, they left him there all the way back to Kansas City. I heard a story like that, Letty said, only it was about a boy who rode a three-legged horse all the way to Springfield, and would you two hush up with your stories and let the poor girl tell her own? Ruth Ann scolded. All eyes were back on me. I don't suppose I have any story to tell, but my name's Abilene. That ain't a name, that's a place, said Billy. You come from the one in Kansas or Texas? Neither. It doesn't matter where she's from, said a girl with fancy curls that looked like they were done in a beauty parlor. She raised her eyebrows and looked down her nose at me. The fact is, she's been living in a saloon and a stone throws from that spooky Mercedes divining parlor. My mother says that place is nothing but a den of iniquity. The only places I'd seen within a stone's throw from Shady's place were the cemetery and that broken-down shack of a house with perdition written on the gate. Truth was, I didn't know what a divining parlor or a den of iniquity was, but you can bet I planned to find out. Shut up, Charlotte, and give the girl a chance to talk, Ruth Ann said again. Well, where are you from? Where's your home? That question always came up real quick. It was a universal, and I was ready for it. All over. My daddy says it's not down on any map. True places never are. Another voice, an older voice, spoke from the back of the room. I see your father's well versed in the works of Herman Melville. Suddenly chairs scooted back and the whole class stood up. Good morning, Sister Redempta. Moby Dick, to be precise. Good morning, class. I see you've had ample time to meet your new classmate and welcome her with tales of dead bodies and dens of iniquity. She raised an eyebrow to the class. I gathered it was a woman since they called her sister, but she was covered in black with only her face peeking out of what looked like a white little box. It was hard telling. Gideon says a rose is a rose, but when it comes down to it, there's some more rosy and some more thorny. I didn't yet know if she was rose or thorn, but one thing I knew for sure, she wasn't any universal. She was a towering figure, gliding solemnly to the front of the room. Her posture was straight and formal. The only movement about her was the swaying of a long strand of wooden beads wrapped around her waist and extending down to her knees. I caught the scent of lye soap as she walked past. Strong as it was, she must be a believer in cleanliness being next to godliness, and she wasn't taking any chances. It did occur to me to find it strange for a Baptist minister to send me to a Catholic school. Sometimes religious folks draw pretty deep lines in the sand, but having seen Shady's place, which was also part church, saloon, and workshop, I could tell his lines were a bit fuzzy. Sister Redempta placed a stack of papers on her desk. I'm sure you are eagerly awaiting your final report cards. There was a good amount of moaning and shuffling. Rest assured you have all received marks that are fair and respective of your work throughout the past year. She picked up the first paper in the stack. Billy Clayton. Billy walked to the front. Sister? He nodded, accepting the paper. As he shuffled back, those freckles got lost in the red rising in his cheeks. Charlotte Hamilton. Miss Beauty Parlor pranced to the front of the room. Thank you, sister. She smiled at everyone on her way back. But hearing the yelp she let out afterward, I thought she'd sat on a tack. Her hand shot up. Sister Redempta, I'm afraid there's been a mistake. There is a B marked beside catechism. I'm aware of that, Charlotte. I graded her final exam, and among other things, I do not believe that wearing black to a funeral or giving last year's feather bonnet to your sister can be classified as corporal works of mercy. May Hughes, she continued, Ruth Ann McIntyre, Noah Russo, Soletta Taylor. It was almost worth having to go to school just to see everybody itching and squirming. After looking at her report card, Letty Taylor slouched in her seat and whispered to Ruth Ann, "Charlotte better air out her black dress for a funeral, because my mama's going to kill me." I was sitting pretty as each name was called, knowing mine would not be among them. Abilene Tucker. I must have been smiling for a while, because all of a sudden my mouth hurt from changing position so fast. "You are Abilene Tucker," Sister Redempta said, as if I'd been wondering about that for some time. "I understand that you have just arrived, and unfortunately that leaves me with no basis on which to give you a grade for this term." "Yes, ma'am," I said. Ain't it a shame, I thought. "Therefore you will have a special assignment to complete during the summer." Assignment? Summer? A rose is a rose, but she was sprouting thorns, all right. "I am pleased that your ears are in such able condition. Let us put your mind to the test as well. It seems everyone is fond of a good story, dead bodies on trains notwithstanding. Therefore, your assignment will be to write a story of your own. You may select the topic, and it will be graded for grammar, spelling, punctuation, and creativity. It will be due September 1st. She didn't wait for any ifs, ands, or buts from me, and good thing, too, as I couldn't think of a thing to say. But I didn't have any plans of still being in Manifest come September. "If you need any help getting started," she peered out of her white box at the class, "I am quite certain there are some students who would be happy to offer their assistance." There was a god-awful quiet as nobody even looked my way. Then Letty Taylor chanced to shoo off a fly, and quicker than an auctioneer that woman pegged her. "Thank you, Soletta. Perhaps your mother will allow you a stay of execution for a few months." Ruth Ann laughed behind her hand. "And Ruth Ann, a kind gesture on your part. As for the rest of you," she shot an evil eye at the class, "it would do you well to remember for next term that acts of charity and kindness are also taken into consideration in one's overall grade." Charlotte's hand shot up again. "I'd be happy to help the poor girl, sister." She gave me a pitiful look. "I'll even help her to find some more suitable clothes, something a little less travel." "That won't be necessary, Charlotte. I'm sure Abilene will have quite enough help. Now let us stand for prayer." The class stood, and Charlotte flipped her hair around. "No matter," she whispered over her shoulder. "I'm spending most of the summer with relatives in Charleston. You know, South Carolina." She was suddenly talking with a southern accent. "Pity, though. I would have thought clothing the poor in taste would have been a fine corporal work of mercy." Snooty girl, a universal. Next chapter. Fort Ticonderoga, May 28, 1936. Fortunately, the last day of school was brief, just long enough to find out report cards and clean out desks. After lunch, when Shady and I could use the old tree house out back for having friends over, he was off on 2 accounts. First, I didn't have any friends. Second, the conglomeration of half-nailed boards could hardly be called a tree house. Oh, and it was in a tree all right, 30 feet up, with nothing to climb on except skinny branches and a rope ladder that looked to be holding on for dear life. But I'd spent part of the afternoon helping tidy up around Shady's place, and now wanted to be alone and look through the Lucky Bill cigar box I'd found under the floorboards. That treehouse looked to be as alone as I could get. So I stuffed the box in my satchel and climbed, one creaky step at a time. The daylight coming through the floorboards was enough to make me wish I had a little fat on me so I wouldn't slide right through to the ground. Inside, I looked out a jagged hole that was pretending to be a window. I could see everything from up there. The Manifest Herald on one side of the hardware store, Koski's Diner, and the Better Days Funeral Parlor on the other. Across the street were the bank, the post office, Dawkins' Drug and Dime Store, Cooper's Barber Shop, and the Curly Q Beauty Emporium. and those train tracks that Gideon was at the other end of. Then I saw Letty and Ruth Ann run into Dawkins' Drug and Dime. I stood on the outside, looking in, on my way home from school. It had a soda fountain and jars of lemonade, licorice whips, and candy buttons. I must have been steaming up the window because a stern-looking woman, probably Miss Dawkins herself, had shooed me off. I wondered what treats those girls were getting. Maybe Gideon'd take me there when he came to get me. Again I felt a little off balance, like I'd felt in the newspaper office the day before. But who wouldn't feel a little wobbly in a rickety treehouse so high above the ground? Enough goosenecking. I had to look around the treehouse, figuring out what I'd haul up with me the next time. Food, for one thing. I'd skipped lunch, and the afternoon was heading from mid to late. There wasn't much left in the tree fort from previous dwellers. Just an old hammer and a few rusted tin cans holding even rustier nails. A couple of wood crates with the sock girl holding her umbrella painted on top of them, and a shabby plaque dangling sideways on one nail. Fort Ticonderoga, probably named after the famous fort from Revolutionary War days. Anything else that might have been left behind had probably been weathered to bits and fallen through the cracks. No matter, I'd have this place whipped into shape lickety-split. First off, I'd pick out the straightest nail I could find and fix that sign right up. Fort Ticonderoga was open for business. Kneeling in front of one of those crates was like I was at an altar. I opened the cigar box and let the contents tumble out. There was the map. Not a folded-up road map, but a homemade one on faded paper with worn edges. It was hand-drawn picture of places around town, labeled with names. Up top in a youthful hand were the words, "The Home Front." Then there were the keepsakes, little things kept for the sake of something or someone. A cork, a fishhook, a silver dollar, a fancy key, and a tiny wooden baby doll, no bigger than the thimble, painted in bright colors, with a face and everything. To me they were like treasures from a museum. Things a person could study to learn about another time and the people who lived back then. Then there were the letters. I selected one and held the thin paper to my nose, wondering, hoping I'd smell something of Gideon as a boy. Maybe smells like a dog or of wood or pond water. I felt like I was floating in my daddy's world of summer and hide and seek and fishing when I opened the paper and read the greeting. "Dear Jinx," it said in unfamiliar penmanship. My heart sank like a 5-gallon bucket of disappointment. The cigar box and letters didn't belong to Gideon, but I kept reading. Ned Gillen, Santa Fe Railroad, car next to caboose, January 15th, 1918.